Hey guys, thanks for joining me today, Ross Marcagiani, and another great conversation at revolutionwellness.com. Today we're going to be learning about what methylation is. What are some common issues that can run into methylation, such as our MTHFR SNP? What are influencing factors such as our B9 and B12 vitamin? Also, how do we treat those factors and how do we make sure that we're methylating correctly? We're going to dive into all these topics today, so let's begin. So first, we're going to learn about what is methylation. So when we break it down to its most simplistic term, methylation is nothing but adding a methyl group to a carbon skeleton. So adding that methyl group, which is a carbon that has 3 hydrogens attached to that carbon, which makes the methyl. And we're going to add that to that carbon skeleton so that we either can stop expressing that molecule or we don't have anything else added on or any other organic molecule added on, such as our sulfate, our nitrogen, our oxygen, other various carbons. And what that methylation is going to do is it's going to help express a gene or it's going to help turn off a gene. So we have a blueprint of nucleotide binding. So nucleotides are a basic structure of DNA and RNA. And methylation is going to play a crucial influence in synthesizing DNA and RNA molecules, which is basically how we individualize ourselves, how we differentiate from myself from my neighbor next door. It's going to help express or individualize your tissues, your cells, your nerves, your proteins, your muscles, everything to make you who you are. And if we're not methylating correctly, we can alter that blueprint. So nucleotides have that typical blueprint where C binds to G, so cysteine binds to guanine, and A binds to T. Adenosine binds to thymine. And this is a standard blueprint that goes on for all of our genes and all our DNA. RNA has a different gene sequencing, but it's the same thing. It has a blueprint of nucleotides that need to be bound together. And this is able to, again, express ourselves and differentiate ourselves. It's able to turn on the good genes, such as our natural killer cells or our tumor suppressant or cancer suppressing cells. And it has the ability to turn off bad genes, such as our tumor genes, cancer genes, such as like our glial cell activation, or such as like maybe the accumulation of like neurofibrillary tangles, which involves in Alzheimer's. So it's really important that we're methylating correctly and that we're getting that foundational blueprint expressed correctly. So now that we've talked a little bit about methylation and the importance of having that blueprint in the nucleotides, we'll go into what exactly is going on in methylation. So just as a disclaimer here, this is a very generalized diagram here. I mean, we could get into transamination, deamination, and the other byproducts, but we're going to just make it really simple so that we can understand the basic behind methylation and the breakdown of folic into folic acid and into SAM, which we'll talk about right now. So in our diet, we're typically going to have a high source in the foods of folate. And folate is, not the ideal form. I mean, it's fine if you can break down, you can folate correctly and you can methylate correctly. But if you have any issues or have any concerns, I like to just avoid any issues and just go straight to the money trail, which is going to be our folic acid, which I like to supplement. Folic acid is going to be more synthetically available. It's going to be easier to break down, and it's more of a stable molecule. So it's just going to be the easier, safer route to just ingest that folic acid. But anyways, we're going to ingest our food, and we're going to break down the folate. Folate gets absorbed, and we're going to shuttle that folate over to the liver. Here, this is another issue. In general, I like to think of health as a giant spider web. So think about stringing one string in that spider web. It's going to move the entire spider web just from that one string. So we're going to just from if we're not breaking down processes in the liver correctly, or if we're not detoxifying correctly, or the liver is just not working correctly, we're not going to be able to break down that folate correctly. So that's just something I want to have patients be aware of. So we got the folate in the liver. Now that liver is going to convert it to the 5-MTHF, which is 5-methylene tetrahydrofolate. So we have that tetrahydrofolate. Now we're going to use our MTHFR, which stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. So whenever we have the word ACE or the ASC at the end of a word, that means enzyme. So it's going to take a larger molecule and break it down into a smaller one. So we'll take the MTHFR and we're going to add it right here to the cycle, where it's going to take the 5-MTHF and break it into the 5-10-MTHF. So this is a crucial step because now we can produce precursors that are going to be able to help DNA and RNA synthesis. It's going to be able to influence and impact that blueprint that we talked about earlier. So next, and also when we have the 5-MTHF, it's during that methylation process from the MTHFR, it will take a methyl from that and bring it over to homocysteine. Now homocysteine, once it has that methyl group, can then be converted to methionine, and then methionine will go and be converted into SAM, which is S-adenosyl methionine. And this is the major regulatory process for methylating DNA. So if we don't have adequate SAM or not being able to convert to SAM, we're not going to methylate that DNA correctly. So it's really important that we're making sure that we have adequate SAM and that we have methyl tetrahydrofolate working from 5 to 510. Also, as you can tell, B12 is a crucial vitamin, so cobalamin, making sure we have an adequate cobalamin in our body is going to help influence this process of converting to methionine converting to our methionine and making sure that we're using 510 MTHF correctly. So that's really important that we have, again, our cobalamin and that we have our folic acid to methylate correctly. So if we were running into issues here, say now we're going to get into our MTHFR SNP. So SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. So we're going to, now what happens if we take this SNP and we alter it right here, it's going to shut this pathway completely down. Now we can no longer take that 5-MTHF and convert to the 5-10-MTHF. So now we'll have an increase in plasma folate, we'll have an increase in homocysteine, and we'll have a decrease in SAM. So now we're not going to be able to methylate correctly, and now there's going to be an issue in that nucleotide blueprint. So some common issues you can see here are going to be genes such as our C677T and our A1298C. So remember how we talked about how nucleotides had that blueprint, A binds to T, C binds to G. Now that C, instead of binding to G, is going to bind to a T. And now that A, instead of binding to the T, is going to bind to a C. And this is going to throw off our gene expression. So we no longer can turn on, so those good genes that we turned on are now going to be turned off. Those tumor suppressing genes, the natural, so now they're going to be turned off. So now the tumor suppressing genes are natural killer cells. Instead of them being on, now they're going to be turned off. And now those bad genes or expressions of genes will be turned on instead of turned off. So now we'll have activation of tumor cells, cancer cells, activation of that glial cell activation that will influence and accumulate neurofibrillary tangles. So it's just a bad combination that we have going on. And this is kind of how I like to describe it, to kind of connect the whole thing. So think about we're in an assembly line, or you're watching an assembly line, you're watching these machines build cars. And they're taking the parts of the car, the frame of the car, and they're adding it onto the car. They're taking the doors, adding them on, taking the wheels, we're adding them on, we're putting the window on, putting the hood on, and so on. Well, now their programming is messed up. So now the wheels aren't being put where the wheels are. Maybe the wheels are being put where the doors are. And now the doors are being put where the wheels are. The front of the hood is being put to the back, and the back is being put to the front, and so on. And now we're not just having, it's just not going to be a functioning car. So that's kind of like how I like to describe it. It's just things aren't going to be expressed correctly. And if we have this issue, we have this MTHFR SNP, we can have increased risk of cardiovascular. It's not going to be a direct correlation or cause, but it's been shown to be an influence and have a common association that these MTHFR SNPs, the C677T and the A1298C, have been associated with cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, stroke, depression, and the list goes on. So making sure it's very obvious that we're methylating correctly. So how we want to, before we do anything, we want to make sure we're assessing, not guessing. So really important that if you think you might have the SNP, or you want to check out if you do have the SNP, to get PCR testing, polymerase chain reaction testing, to see if you have the SNP. Or we can do some blood work and see if we have elevated homocysteine levels, see if we have low SAM levels, see if we have high plasma folate levels. We can also look at methylmalonic acid, which is directly correlated to B12. It is broken down by B12. So if we don't have adequate B12, we're going to have high urinary methylmalonic acid. So that's another key factor that we want to look in and make sure we're assessing, not guessing. So if we do have that SNP, these two SNPs that I talked about, making sure we want to avoid folic acid foods because we're not going to be able to convert that folic acid anymore. We want to make sure that we're avoiding folate blocking drugs such as methotrexate or birth control pills. We want to make sure that we're avoiding antacids because the antacids are going to help the conversion of B12 and help absorb B12. Like anything else, making sure that we have a great foundational diet, that we have our foundation super solid. We're avoiding gluten, we're avoiding fructose, we're avoiding lots of sugars, we're avoiding excessive alcohol. Making sure that we have that great foundation. We're exercising, we're taking all our vitamins and our supplements. Making sure that we're just doing a good job on our foundation. And then back to where I talked about taking in our folic acid. Making sure that if we are worried or concerned about methylation, that we're going to take, which I like, is L5-MTHFR. And I'll take this 400 milligrams BID, which is 2 times a day. So the thing with L5-MTHFR is that it won't hide B12 deficiency. So with other folates or just taking folate in or other folic acids, they can mask B12 deficiency. So if we look into blood markers and we want to see if we're deficient in B12, it'll mask that and we won't be able to tell if we are truly deficient. This will be able to have a direct, it won't cover up that B12 deficiency. So we'll be able to see if you are B12 deficient. Or we can do the optimal multivitamin, which is a brand out there, which I love. And I'll do 3 capsules BID. And this is great because it just covers all the B vitamins. It makes sure you have adequate amounts of all the B vitamins, and it makes sure that we're getting the downstream folic acid so that we don't have to go through this process and we can go straight into the key element and make sure we're methylating correctly. So taking these 2 supplements, it just basically skips this process so we can get right to the important degraded molecule or the biosynthetic molecule so we can just go straight into methylation. So that's the real key here. And then obviously if we don't have this MTHFR SNP, which a lot of people do not, but just to be said, a lot of people do have this SNP and they don't even realize it. So it can't hurt to get that PCR testing. But foods that will be high in folic or folate, which will be converted to folic acid, we have our asparagus, our lentils, our spinach, and our avocados, which are really important and high in that folic acid. So again here, just making sure that we're figuring out if we're methylating correctly. Methylation is super important for our DNA and RNA synthesis, so we're expressing that correct blueprint. and we want to make sure that we're aware if we do have that SNP and we're not methylating correctly, and that we're putting those wrong parts on the wrong area of the car. So it's making sure that we're getting those right parts on the car so that we can function and we can, have the correct genes expressed, and we can make sure we're not increased risk or increased association with those cancer, strokes, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, making sure that later in life we're living as healthy as we were and as happy as we were in the beginning of our life. Thank you guys for taking your time to be with me today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you know anyone out there that will benefit from this conversation, please share this with them. Like I always say, we're in this together to become healthier and happier. Thank you for your time and have a great day.